amazing.
All right, Mas Menteri. Now we asked the most favorite question recently. We know that there is a change of politics that is happening in Indonesia, and I think this is not only in Indonesia but also actually around the world, Mas Menteri. That people were asking, how can we ensure the continuity and sustainability of Merdeka Belajar, the current momentum of our education transformation? How would you respond to this question?
Well, I think that from the very beginning, we knew that this transition was going to happen. So you remember very early in our meetings when we were deciding what to do, and we were filtering different activities based on the impact. It wasn't just impact that made us decide what to prioritize, but it was also irreversibility.
Right.
Remember that?
Yep.
So we had this criteria for irreversibility, like how can we, let's only focus on things that will be very hard to turn back. Because I think that's a very important pillar of continuity.
Right.
So I think that the first principle to do this is by, instead of viewing our policies as government top-down imposed, that we're actually trying to trigger grassroots movements. So program Guru Penggerak, mover teachers, is a perfect example of that, where we have created 100,000 champions in multiple levels who will then become principals and superintendents all across Indonesia who are believers. They are believers in Merdeka Belajar, and their training for 6 to 9 months was all about the belief and the mindset changes and the leadership training to influence teachers around them. So that's hard to turn back. When you have, my hope is that those mover teachers all across Indonesia will become influencers. They already are, because I've heard in various places. By the way, we don't pay them anything extra.
Right.
It's incredible. They're doing this purely out of their own extra work, purely out of their own motivation to change. And those teachers will become will convert other teachers to this paradigm over time. So that's exponential to hit that tipping point. I think the other thing is how to make this irreversible is that you cannot force a curriculum if it does not benefit the learning experience for teachers and for principals. So if it doesn't work, they are going to want a new change. But if you have a new curriculum that has been already voluntarily accepted by 80% of the schools out there, 70-80% of the schools out there, it is going to be very hard for someone to impose a totally new curriculum when they have chosen to have that curriculum. So that's another thing. The third, I think, factor of sustainability is the digital revolution that we have triggered. The platforms they are using, the stickiness of all the apps and the platforms that have already been ingrained in their lives, not because someone forced them to use it, but because it's just better.
Right.
It's better.
It helps them.
Yeah. So the adoption, organic adoption, is going to be very hard to detach and dismantle. And because all of those platforms support the policy initiatives, you can't pull one without pulling the other, right? So there's a certain level of stickiness that I think will persist over time. Once you have tasted the fruits of student-centered learning, I think people will be very aggressive in defending it. I think teachers and principals, which may not be the majority yet in the schools out there, but I think if we can get to 30% of schools already being true believers in this, which I think we already have, it's going to be very hard to reverse. Very hard to reverse. So I think that those are kind of the principles of sustainability, make it into a movement instead of a policy. Really focus on the bottom-up influencers and change agents, and also try to create choice in the system to make people feel good about making choices feeling good about being emancipated and building that confidence to actually doing what's best for their own school instead of what they think the government wants them to do. I think that's really
own the reform.
exactly owning the reform. You're right. That's the best way of putting it. Owning the reform. Make it that it's theirs. That's going to be hard to dismantle.
Yeah. I just remember talking to a principal, and she said, "Sir, we have fallen in love with Merdeka Belajar." Serius, it's fallen in love. Please don't let us be broken-hearted.
Don't break our hearts.
Okay, so it's amazing the choice of words that this principal used, because like you said, Mas Menteri, so like really like believers in this, they're owning it, and this principal has been be a teacher and principal for close to 30 years.
Yeah.
So she said like I've never felt like this liberated and very meaningful doing my job than what I'm doing now. So it's like the very first time.
Whenever I go to the regions, and it's always the question they ask: what happens after you leave? Right? What happens after the new president comes in? And I always turn back and say, look, ultimately, it's going to be up to you. If you want this to continue, and you are vocal about it, and you discuss it, and you unite with the other teachers in your neighborhood to sustain this, there will be nothing that the government can do to stop you.
Right.
You own these schools.
Yeah.
You are the teachers and principals.
Yeah.
If you want to push it in a direction, it will be very hard for governments to push you in a different direction. So it's up to you. I always say it's up to you. It's your school. You know, you're the one that's empowered to do this. So defend it. Defend it vocally, and we will continue in this direction. I believe ultimately it depends on the principals and teachers carrying this program forward.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mas Menteri.